We're finally here, folks, the third and final installment of Spamcracker's very long talk about Voltron. With the intent of keeping this video not nearly as long as the last one, I have to quickly say all of the disclaimers and spoiler warnings are in the first video, and if you haven't noticed, there are two other parts in this series, so if this is the one you've just now shown up on, please consider checking those out first, lest some things I say not make sense. Finally, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of the last two seasons, just remember that a lot of things I say are my own opinions and criticisms, as well as things that I liked about them. After Season 4, I admittedly took a long break from Voltron because of how badly it rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't come back to it until the week of the final season. Now I get to say what the last 26 episodes of the show felt like to me. People are not obliged to agree with what I have to say. In fact, I know there is a good portion of the fan base that will take ire with certain bits of it, but I feel the need to say these things anyway. Are you ready? I know I am. No fake title cards this time. In we go! Well, we've gone back to 13 episodes to a season. That's a breath of fresh air, isn't it? I was under the impression that we were going to keep getting half seasons until the end, and I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. What does Season 5, otherwise known as Season 7, have to offer us? Well, I thought, how much worse than Season 4 can it be? None at all, really. As far as my personal feelings go, I didn't think Season 5 was really bad. I put it at a moderately good rating, approximately 2.5 stars out of 5, because other than some interesting plot takes, there's really very little to tip the scales for me one way or another. Season 5 isn't remembered for anything particularly stand out as far as where the plot goes now that the Lotor part is over. The Paladins have a mission to get back to Earth, but without the Castle of Lions, that's going to take a long time, so the first half of the season is spent doing just that. We have our standard road trip antics, and in the meantime we find out that Voltron has been gone for a much longer time than they had thought. It turns out using the castle to close multiple space-time rifts to keep the fabric of their reality together has some time displacement side effects. They've been gone and out of contact with the entire rest of the universe for 3 years. Now, under most circumstances, I've noticed that people really tend to hate time skips like this, but in this season, I think the cards are played right in order to make it work. We take some time to establish this fact, and a couple of episodes are given to help us understand what kind of havoc has been wrought on the universe in the absence of both Voltron and any defined leader of the Galra Empire. Things like the Coalition falling apart without their banner of peace, and pirates and warlords becoming the prevalent powers of the universe as the Empire falls apart, along with the note that the star maps the team was using in order to find out where they were are all off, all make sense. Now the question becomes whether or not we feel the time skip was necessary or served a purpose. In Season 4, I considered Keith's field trip through the Quantum Abyss with his mom a little shaky with how the passage of time was handled there, but it managed to work out. I justify that with the simple concept of, all this time and experience helped Keith become a better person who is more ready and willing to finally lead Voltron. Season 5 has a stronger reason for temporally displacing the Paladins and crew: the IGF Atlas. The second half of this season is spent on Earth, giving the audience the lowdown on what happened in the 3 years since Sam Holt got back to Earth. After jumping through a lot of hoops, they start building what is meant to be more or less a replacement for the Castle of Lions. It's a really big ship that integrates Altean and human technology. Of course, this is going to take a long time to make, and a 3-year time skip is being generous even considering that this takes place a good amount of time in the future, apparently. Unfortunately for Earth, it's now that the Galra decide to stop by and take the planet seriously, and, take over. Hi, Sendak, you're looking scruffier than before. I like it, but I don't like you. The One Galaxy Garrison Force base is the only thing left standing after the initial invasion because, hey, alien technology to protect us from the other aliens. Sendak decides he's going to pull a long con here on Earth to bait Voltron, which doesn't entirely not work, but Voltron was coming back to Earth anyway, so moving on. Before Voltron comes back, we get to meet a lot of new characters. Characters who might have been fun to get to know better if given their own spin-off series, but I digress. Prominent among them are Veronica, Lance's older sister. I like her. She's smart and nosy, and she ships Lance and Allura. Then there's Sonda. Admiral Sonda. I don't like her, but in my defense, I'm sure I'm not supposed to. She's there just to be another source of conflict on Earth before the Galra show up. The only thing I can say in slight positives related to her as a character is that if this kind of situation actually happened in real life, I'm sure she's a reflection of a person or faction that would actually act this way in the event of impending alien invasion. She loves her people and her planet, but is going about protecting them all the wrong ways. It's a very basic archetype, and like I said, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to actually like her. The pilots of the Mechaflex Exo Fighters are interesting enough as they are, but are really only relevant to the plot as a group of elite soldiers and not individuals, which is sad because they all have their own stories and personalities, but not enough minutes in an episode to them. Finally, let's not forget Pigeon Matt's mom, who was a lovely lady, and I would have liked to have seen more of her. So, Voltron manages to sneak back to Earth and reunite with the humans at last. The final episodes are spent fighting Sendak and preventing the Galra fleet occupying the planet from destroying it, which begs the question of how long were they going to wait before destroying the world anyway? Sonda dies, Sendak dies, the Galra are defeated, and just before we are allowed to celebrate, we meet a new threat to the universe, a roe beast that is powered and piloted by an Altean? Cliffhanger! This is where the story goes, that being said without much detail. The good of it is that we get to go back to Earth and we get to see what was going on there. The bad of it was, Sendak is the bad guy again. Sendak is a warlord now or whatever, like so many other people became during the absence of Voltron, and he seems to be working of his own accord. Emphasis on seems. At this point, it also seems that he is the head of the Flame of Purification that was started when the Splinter factions who didn't want to follow Lotor showed up last season. He wants Voltron destroyed, and that's probably just because he's a Galra who has nothing better to do than seek revenge, right? I mean, we get to finally see into his memories that we jacked from Season 1, and if we extracted these memories from Season 1, why does this hologram of him look like the scruffy Season 5 Sendak? Consistency. Anyway, Sendak was never meant to be anything special. He's really just a bit of a filler villain here who was a loose end we needed to tie up. While on that subject, what about the other main characters? The Paladins don't really change any from what they've been in the past season. The most we get from them is in Episode 5, where they get stuck out in space and have to use the power of honesty, friendship, and unity to keep themselves sane. Basically, Season 1, Episode 2 on steroids and then jacked up to 100. My takeaway is another instance of Hunk being the glue that holds these guys together, and using his perspective on always being scared to empathize with them and keep a level head while also taking Keith's verbal abuse scores him big points. Unfortunately, that's really the last time I'll be saying that. Kuran is Kuran, Krolia leaves to help salvage the Blades of Marmora, Rommel is useless, and Shiro is still here, doing nothing helpful. He's dead. Shiro, why wouldn't you just stay dead? You hold no value as a character anymore. Really, Season 5 is more of a segue from Season 4 to Season 6. A transfer season to let us take a step back and take a deep breath and prepare for what comes next. So, as much as it is annoying, it does make sense to bring back our favorite B-class villain and not make any major changes to the main characters. In the end, most of the characters' development arcs are complete by this point, and we have nowhere to go but forward with everyone as they are. For better or for worse, this season is a middle-of-the-road thing that helps prep us for what is to come. Okay, time for the gripes. Once again, a flashback episode that could have been great if it wasn't usurped by the rest of the team going on a comic relief mission. Don't get me wrong, it's plot relevant enough as it is, but if we're going to let Keith practically monopolize the flashbacks in this series, at least let him have an entire episode to himself for them. You know, like how Pidge did back in Season 3? We seem to have this really strange sense of passage of time based on how Shiro's hair looks in these flashbacks, but no part of this really feels right. Now, what is this reason behind Shiro being sick or whatever? What is this? I personally don't like how in these flashbacks we're seeing a version of Shiro who is like... What, he's like old or something? He's some sort of irresponsible risk taker or has been known to be that? He's having a midlife crisis? What's going on here? He's like someone who is directly contradicting the person Keith looks up to as a role model in these very scenes. Now listen, I don't mind getting a sense for Shiro was young and dumb at some point too, and his experience are what made him the man that he is now, but that's not what this is. We just needed Shiro to look like he's putting strain on his relationship with his roommate, so we gave him some last-minute medical condition to make it look like he's being stupid about going on the Kerberos mission. By the way, 25 years old or 24, whatever, there's not really consistency with Shiro's age. However old he is, he's still way too young to be having a midlife crisis. Is he still young and dumb? Is that what we're supposed to be taking away from this? This is one example of forced and shoddy writing. There's something that just doesn't fit here. At least Allura Ex Machina is not what stabilizes Shiro, thank goodness. Also, she mentions the lions can't do much on such low energy because their strength got sapped in the battle against Lotor, and I want to call shenanigans on that. The last thing they were doing was getting supercharged in the quintessence field, and I refuse to believe that just wore off the instant they got out of it. Okay, it bothers me that they seem to neglect the existence of their pet cow for the entirety of their trip back to the Milky Way. Hi, Aksha. Bye, Aksha? Did we just leave her here on this planet without a way off? I need more information from her. Like, are these things on her head horns or hair ornaments? Speaking of that, shut up about Lotor not being the man you thought he was. Honestly, how did he trick you? What kind of man did you think he was? You, Zethrid, Ezor, and Narti were all watching firsthand when he was saying things like, the masses are easily manipulated. They have literally no excuse for thinking he was a stand-up guy, unless you want to give us those flashbacks as to why they think they're such an exception to the rule. Quick nitpick. A phoebe is 1 month according to Pidge in the next season. A decaphoebe is 1 year. Deca means 10, not 12, so the math on the time exchange rate weirds me out. Dodecaphoebes doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but still, it makes more sense. Game show episode, because we can. This was dumb, and I hate omnipotent trickster characters like Bob with a passion, but at least we got to see Zarkon be funny. I want to know what the Galaxy Garrison Force told the families of Hunk, Lance, and Pidge who went missing with Shiro. Everyone was told that Shiro and the Holt dudes were dead when they didn't come back from their mission, so what about the spontaneously missing children? Shiro gets a new arm, and it's stupid. At least Sendak's detachable robot arm has something in between the shoulder and the forearm. Of course, only Allura could come up with something this stupid looking and has to be powered by magic magnets. Is she an engineer now, too? No, really, I want to know what the point in making this was and why it had to look like this. P.S. This was just a ploy to get Allura to take her crown off, right? We never made a big deal out of the crown before, so why worry about it now? Is it all just symbolism? I'm sorry, but symbolism really doesn't work well in this show. You know, Keith is supposed to be the leader now. If we keep having Shiro around to be like, believe in the powers of your connections to your lions and still give half-effective pep talks, when is Keith gonna have the chance? He always seemed to have the strongest bond with his lion in the first place. I'm surprised that Karan is the one who has the castle crystal around his neck the whole time instead of Allura, but it actually is appropriate considering his grandfather is the one who designed and built the castle. If magic is involved, Allura can save us. Sonda be like, how do we know the aliens are hostile? Because we were stuck out in space with them trying to kill us repeatedly, you twit! Okay, so the reflector shields are clearly in place. Can Sendak not see that before telling the Zyforge cannons to fire? Now I have questions for how long these things can fire based off of how long it took to charge this continuous blast, and how short the first fire was. Oh, now we decide that we're gonna use the lions to destroy the cannons. Oops, Sendak's hair is changing color here. Oh, wow, I just realized how tall Sendak is. You know, any other season, I would have thought Shiro versus Sendak was cool, but since I insist that Space Dad should no longer be living, this feels very hollow. He's not even the one who wins the battle. Come on. P.S. Keith, I see you're still making reckless decisions. I mean, what would you have done in the event that Sendak just lifted up his slightly less stupid than Shiro's souped-up cyborg Galra arm and caught you mid-fall? No, I'm not even going to give you style points here. Here's Aksha spying on Keith and his mom and Dog visiting Dad Kogane's grave. No, really, what happened to you, Aksha, and how did you get here? Apparently, the explosion of the robot, which took forever to fight and would have theoretically taken out half of the Earth if they didn't get it back to the out of the atmosphere, did not kill the pilot or completely destroy the shell. They spent months salvaging it to try and figure out more about it, blah, 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 but we still don't know why self-destructing didn't kill this Altane. Alright, time for the good news! I do like what they tried to do with the first episode of Flashbacks, even if it did fall flat on its face. Once and for all, Shiro and Keith's brotherly/mentor-student relationship makes me happy. Speaking of Keith, he does have some highlights this season, like fighting this druid again. His name is Massidus, by the way. Saying goodbye to his mom was sweet, and despite the tension we see at the halfway point, we do get some more of him being bros with Lance and Hunk more. Also, guess what? Apparently Keith and Krylia did consult Kolovan and the other Blades in regards to their findings in the Quantum Abyss before confronting Lotor. Good to know. Speaking of which, Krylia's Galra facial marks go all the way down her neck, whereas this thing on Keith's face doesn't on him, so I'm sticking with the scar theory. Romel saying Quiznak incorrectly is funny because it just goes to show the kind of 10,000-year generational gap that has occurred while the now ancient Alteans Kuran and Allura were in hypersleep. That's not a Mandalorian symbol. Anyone remember me complaining about how underutilized the space mice are? Well, the good news is at least we don't have to have the same problem with Wolfie over here. He's such a good boy. Kuran tries really hard but doesn't get anywhere. Once again, even the mice are more helpful than he is, but at least we get to see him chameleon up. Take that, Lotor, and your flawed knowledge of Alteans. And while we're on the subject of Alteans, I can finally answer a question I had back in Season 1. Yes, apparently Allura just happens to have super strength. Hey, it's Mako from The Legend of Korra! While the MFE pilots aren't given the time I would like to see them on screen, the fact that they are actually able to combat the Galra is something I can appreciate. You go, B-Team! Hey, it's the return of Pidge and the holograms! Literally, all the Holts have this funny little hacker icon, don't they? So, one might wonder whether or not Sendak had any idea about his memories being jacked, or if he had any other suspicions about the ways that the Paladins and Earthlings might be trying to use his tactics against him, but let's face facts, even if he thought they knew, he would probably still be doing the same stuff because he's been using tried and true tactics like this to conquer the universe in the name of Zarkon for probably a couple of millennia at least, so, it still makes sense. If it's not broke, don't fix it. When using both arm Bayards at the same time, Voltron can now dual katana wield. Sweet! IGF Atlas, transform! While we recover from the whole the Galra occupied Earth for the past couple of years and it was really tough for humanity thing, we are now opening the system up officially to the Voltron Coalition and intergalactic trade. Welcome back, Matt! Where the fuzz have you been? And that's that for Season 5. Not bad, but definitely not much more than a setup for the series finale. At least we don't have to worry about what happened to Sendak now, because he's dead. But wait, who could be the villain for the final season? So far, there's been a terrible pattern where I talk about one season and it seems pretty good, only to be completely shattered by the season that followed in one way or another. Oh no, this is the series finale, please. Please let there be an exception here. Also, no, I'm not forgetting anything important or relevant from Season 5. Why do you ask? This season has Baby Lotor in it. It's already a win! Okay. Maybe that was a bit of an emotional and spur-of-the-moment thing. Let's see what Season 6 has to offer us. It is the series finale, and I do want to see this through, but will the rule of 2 seasons still apply? No. It was good. The final season of Voltron Legendary Defender was good. Apparently there was a heck of a lot of people, or at least a so-called vocal, very vocal minority, who disagree with this sentiment for reasons, ranging from blah to da and blah blah. But as I take a step back and start to tally up the good things against the bad things, well, there's still plenty I can complain about, but I came out of it satisfied. And since this is my talk about Voltron, that's what matters here, at least until people decide to actually comment back at me. Now, while in every other season I make it a point to talk about how terrible the villain's role is later on in the overview, I can't do that here, because contrary to what other people seem to think, I believe Season 8, which, just to clarify, will be henceforth referred to as Season 6, just because I can, has the best villain in the entire series, and she's arguably one of the strongest written characters. And that's saying something considering I think planning never really went past Season 2 at most. Honerva, formerly Hagar, is the final boss of Voltron Legendary Defender, and to my surprise, I really liked that. Now, let's remember, my opinion of the show was still being plagued by sour feelings about how Lotor's arc ended, so when I thought, who's left to be the bad guy now, Hagar? It was a mean joke because I didn't expect anything they could do with her would actually be good after how badly all the other villains were handled. But imagine my surprise when almost every question I can ask about her on the basis of her being a villain is actually answered in a legitimate way. We are told who she is, what she is doing, how she is doing it, why she is doing it, where she gets her power from, and ultimately understand everything about her. We are shown her loss and her grief. We get a feeling for how she has suffered, and all the things she is doing, no matter how outlandish they are, make sense. All of her means head to one distinct end, which is to take back the happiness she lost when she became Hagar, and can we really fault her for that? No, I'm not saying she's vindicated and nearly destroying existence as we know it. What I'm saying is, unlike Zarkon, who just seemed to be evil and menacing for the sake of being evil and menacing and then not really having a great follow-up on that, and Lotor, whose endgame was never really revealed to us and we can only speculate about what kind of character he was, Honerva makes sense. She is present, she is powerful, she has a plan, and we are actually allowed to know what that plan is. Guess what? Honerva actually has a reason and a rhyme as to why she wants quintessence, what she is using it for, and how she gets it. The dumbest plot device in the whole series works with her. We understand Honerva. I don't have to keep asking questions because they played all the right cards with her character. She's a sympathetic villain, but we can't condone what it is she's doing because it's completely amoral no matter how you slice it. Forget all the shade I was throwing at her in the last video. I get her. I get Honerva now and everything it was she was trying to do and how she planned on doing it. I even get how completely off her rocker she was and why she was going to such extremes. I mean, she explains it herself. Her happiness was so tied to this image of her family who she loved so much but she never got to know for herself that the grief of never seeing that happen was overwhelming. She blamed everyone for the death of her son, and it was within her powers to change that. So she did. She took existence into her own hands in order to achieve her means, and she did it in a way that didn't come across as far-fetched. Or, if you do happen to think the extent of her powers is unbelievable, given what we're shown, I'd just like to point you in the direction of Allura, who is way less experienced and has fewer resources, but is doing pretty much all the same stuff. You just can't fault Honerva for being overpowered. I personally think the scaling of her powers and abilities were great considering the only place to go in a series like this is up. Was Honerva perfect? Nah. There is one line of thought I couldn't quite track with her, and that's how we went from, I want my son back, to, I'm replacing him and my husband with another reality where I can be happy. After pondering about it for a while, I think the latter was probably always Honerva's long-term game, and she knew that even drawing the syncline back from the quintessence field wasn't going to bring Lotor back to her. I mean, I have to think at this point she was smart enough to know that there was no way he could be alive after being stuck there for so long. But at the time, we aren't exactly explained what was going on in this case. Like, why is the syncline moving on its own? How can Honerva manipulate it? Why is she talking like Lotor is back? And why do we get the impression we were totally going to Frankenstein Lotor back into the story somehow? More literally than what actually happened. Even so, this is a small complaint compared to what I had to say about her husband and son as antagonists. So this one part is a little fuzzy. I am here to say that I think it's a little fuzzy because the writers probably didn't know what to do with Lotor even after effectively killing him off. Just saying. I can totally BS a way to bring Lotor back into the series, and at this point, I'm half of the mind to believe that the people behind the scenes were still toying with that idea. So in the end, Honerva has some issues, but they are mostly steeped in the fact that the only things that could make her a better antagonist is if the other main villains had been properly written as well. In other words, it's really not her fault. With all that being said, a great final boss is only a piece to what can make a finale great. Another important piece is, how do our heroes deal with this villain? Well, from here at the start, where we discover that Honerva is the one to beat, to over yonder, where we Gurren Lagann our way to solving the problem with her, it's a lot more bumpy to talk about than just the quality of our villain as a whole. We have an issue with our heroes in this case. I described in the last season overview how pretty much everyone important's character arcs were already complete. Pidge found her family. Lance is less of a goof and more of a dependable team member. Hunk is Hunk and always has been Hunk. Actually, here's the thing about Hunk. I would complain now because he's just the yellow paladin and the food master. You see, the last time we saw him being, an engineer of any sort was back in Season 4, Part 2, and from there forward, he's just emotional support. He gets this role, and plays it very well, mind you. I'm just saying that we've left off any traces of him being tech-savvy, And if it weren't for the fact that the engineering was what got him into the Galaxy Garrison, and likewise the Voltron thing in the first place, I wouldn't mind it as much. I don't have enough information about why he decided to be an engineer to determine that it was never where his real passion was, and be okay with that part of his character being left in the dust. Keith is the leader of Voltron now, but instead of me being okay with that, he's still being overshadowed by Shiro, who is alive and practically backseat driving the team as the White Paladin TM. On the Shiro note, he doesn't really add anything to the story this season that couldn't have easily been done by someone else, which I would use to reinforce my point about how he might as well be dead. Oh wait, he is. Speaking of which, the title of White Paladin is surprisingly accurate when you realize he's the captain of the Atlas now, and it basically makes Voltron's existence null and void, because it can also transform into a giant robot. Karan is Karan, he's the most static character in the show, and everyone else is likewise fulfilling their roles. But then we get to Allura. Okay guys, time to come clean. In the first video, I added a subtitle to a point where I realized I was saying a lot of negative things about Allura. Something along the lines of the fact that I really didn't think she was a bad character, and even though I was complaining a lot, it's not like I disliked her all that much. But as I continued to re-watch and take notes, my giving her the benefit of the doubt got gradually thinner and thinner. I don't think Allura is an offensive character or anything, but I do have problems with her because, and I'm going to use some buzzwords here, I feel like the crew behind the show was trying too hard to make her a strong female character. I can't say whether or not this has anything to do with compensating for her character in the original series not being up to snuff by today's standards, but I theorize that could be part of it. As a result, Allura is far too faultless as a character for me to really like her. Which is sad considering characters like Pidge and even Honerva are strong and female, and they are great characters. It's not like some of Allura's problems aren't explained. Like how at the start of the series, she's wound up pretty tight because she's got a lot to deal with, because her planet is gone, and she has to put together a new crew of the Defenders of the Universe and stuff like that. Plus, she kinda has to be an embassy of Voltron from now on. She has to make tough choices, like deleting her father from the castle to save everyone, and even has to be saved when a mission goes awry. Season 1 Allura isn't perfect, and this is one of the things that I most liked. This is the version of her I liked, despite other alien magical powers that she is instantly given. Later on, though, there is a reason I decided to coin the term Allura ex machina. She solves almost all of their problems because she's some sort of super special individual from a species of super special space elves. And we're not even told what it is that makes her special. Just a genetic fluke or something, I guess. No training or flashbacks to her finding out that she has these powers and has to work on it to hone her inborn powers or anything like that. If there's magic involved, which let me remind you, there is a lot of that in the series, the odds are that Allura is the way to counter it. We can pretend to appreciate Lotor's attempts to become more in touch with his Altean side, but in the end he can't do squat in Orion, and Allura has to be the one and only enlightened one. Another thing I mentioned before is that Allura has this tendency to blame herself for everything that goes wrong and tries to shoulder a lot of burdens herself. Now, this is a humble thing, and it's a very relatable quality, but at what point do we have to take a step back and ask why she thinks she's so special? Okay, I'll admit, that's kind of unfair. I can't fault Allura for thinking she's the center of the conflict of the universe, because that's what she is. She's been written in a way that makes it impossible for Voltron to function without her. The Coalition can't, it's been this way since the start, they reportedly couldn't so much as wormhole without her from the beginning, and now that she's a paladin, Voltron can't function without her either. She's irreplaceable, and I feel like I can't say that with as much confidence about the others. I don't like saying things like this because it's not as though she doesn't have moments of genuine humility or times when she says things that can really hit home. I mean, she did go from hating all the Galra to trying to sympathize with them, so she's had some growth on that front anyway. But we're still stuck with this nagging little feeling that Allura can do no wrong, even when what she's doing is clearly very wrong. You see, Allura has this character flaw that I find kind of annoying where she is rather easily manipulated, and it's gotten Team Voltron into trouble a couple of times. In Season 1, there were repercussions to this, and when she fell into the castle's jacked-up AI trap, she ended up having to part ways with the remnants of her father to save everyone. But what happens later on? We see her manipulated by Lotor in Season 4, or at least that's what we're going to keep saying happened, and what does she get out of being unguarded? More special Altean powers? A kiss? Some sour feelings? Allura cries a bit, but there's no permanent losses from her allowing herself to be fooled in this instance. She's the one who said what pushed Lotor over the edge when he was trying to salvage their relationship, and we're never going to talk about how that ended up ultimately time-jumping everyone and losing the castle. Then, in the final season, we get kind of smacked in the face with Allura can do no wrong. What do I mean? I mean this entity right here. This thing is one of the powers from beyond the quintessence field that corrupted Honerva and drove Zarkon to take her into the quintessence field to try and save her, which then killed them both and revived them as power-hungry zombies who became the scourge of the universe. We acknowledge, in series, that that is what this is. But Allura, tempted by the power of the dark side using ghosts of boyfriends past and present, just picks it up and says, "Yes, I will totally be able to control the powers that brought the universe to its knees." Side note here, this Lotor ghost thing it used to manipulate her got her way too far into the coercion process, considering how much she hated the guy and only has had bad things to say about him between there and here. In the subsequent episodes, she's acting so evil, like she's straight up using dark magic, and this is just fine? You know, I'm pretty sure both Lotor and Honerva's villain arcs involve the lesson that the ends don't justify the means, but when Allura does something stupid and risky that has world-ending potential, it's perfectly fine. Lance and King Alfor's ghost are the only ones who voice real consistent concerns about this, but they get brushed aside because Allura is doing what she needs to do. She's making a tough decision. Now, if there was some sort of recourse, some sort of permanent negative damage to Allura or someone she loved so that we could get a lesson out of this, I might not have such a big problem with it, but there's not. Allura is like unconscious for 2 days and that's it. Literally no harm done from her playing with forces way beyond her control, because apparently she can control them. There's no lesson learned here. Allura is not even forced to acknowledge that what she did could have hurt a lot of people because everything turned out okay. Am I supposed to conclude that their connection through the infinite consciousness of the universe via the Voltron lions kept her stable and is what made it so that nothing terrible happened as a result of this poor decision of hers? Because I don't get that vibe. Guys, I can't. Just after this point, I can't do it with Allura anymore. And in the end, she's the be-all end-all of getting the universe put back together. She uses her ex machina powers to enlighten Honerva, pay some flat-out lying lip service to the poor lady, because we all know Allura saying Lotor was actually pretty good deep down is not how she actually felt about him up until this moment, and then sacrifices herself to save all of existence. Allura ex machina to the end! You know, it was almost a solid save with the concept of teamwork and unity and all that jazz to counter and bring Honerva back from the edge, but then Allura just had to one-up everybody else because she's the most important one of the group. We switched it up, folks! Sven lives and Allura dies! It's frustrating to a point because I really was looking for the best in Allura, but after all this, her sacrifice doesn't feel like something that should have happened. Her endearing moments and redeeming qualities are so overshadowed by this kind of thing that, in the finale, I'm just not sure I feel like she deserved to be the sole savior of all realities. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth that Allura ex machina is what solved the problems with the best villain in this series, but those are just my thoughts on the matter. In addition to Honerva being the final baddie, which I thought was actually good, what else did I not think I was going to enjoy this season but ended up liking? Allura and Lance as an official couple. I know how some certain subgroups of fans feel about this in very strong ways, but I found it to be really sweet, and the way they played it out actually didn't come across as forced. After Season 4, when Lance started being honest with himself and the mice about his feelings for Allura, it really would have been a waste not to see that pan out. Once again, I feel the need to state that Voltron is a spacefaring action-adventure show, and romantic relationships are seriously backburner fuel when it comes to series like this, if they show up at all. And when the creators, if and when, they decide to delve into these now deadly waters, infested with shippers, they have to be very careful about how they do it. As we're coming down to the wire on the runtime for the show, and over the last couple of seasons there have been little here and there things to help set it up for when the choice of will and when these characters actually get together, it actually worked. It did happen, and I don't know about you guys. Actually, I do know about you guys. A lot of you hated it, but I think that Lance and Allura were written together in a way that looked like they could really make each other happy. Like, really, the cute little couple moments and the concern they had for each other, coupled with the fact that in spite of all my complaints about Allura, her dating Lance was something I thought was good for her character. It makes her more likable to know that she's come to develop mutual appreciation for Lance and his feelings for her. But then she died! Allura being gone only upsets me because she didn't earn that honor in my heart, and now Lance is permanently sad and he didn't deserve that. What else happens in the series finale? Well, Voltron ultimately merges with the IGF Atlas, and now Shiro is really just part of the group again. Like, just rest in peace already! I heard you like giant robots, so I put your giant robot in a giant robot. We really did pretty much go full-on Gurren Lagann in the end here. The Atlas really did just make Voltron itself irrelevant, because why have the traditional defender of the universe when you could have Mega Voltron? It's Megatron! Wait, no. It's Gal Voltron! Meh. That's less of a realization than anything I already spoke about, so now on to the tiny grapes. Keith is still in the red paladin armor, and Shiro isn't even wearing the black armor anymore. Why are the Atlas military uniforms not color-coded to the lions? Shiro, stop being dressed like you're anything more than a named background character. I like the Bayards more when I was under the impression they didn't all turn into guns. But that's just me being dumb, right? The weapons just don't seem special anymore. Hey look, Allura is a Lancer now. Why are Zethrid and Ezor here? We thought you guys got blown up last season. Looks like the showrunners didn't even know what to do with Lotor's lackeys either. How sloppy. Most of this episode was a waste of time. This is not a good way to frame Aksha's redemption story. At this point, I don't even know why they tried. Okay, so Voltron is one thing, but how the heck does the Atlas bot work as far as piloting goes? Magic! Theory. The Syncline had a permanent imprint left on it from Lotor's last will and is now trying to carry out his final wishes. Destroy the Paladins. How did Kuran manage to make a wormhole for the Atlas? We will never know how evil Emperor Zarkon got that scar on his face. Yes, Allura, it sure is nice of you to torture Zarkon's soul by imposing on him all the crimes his quintessence-powered corpse had committed without him knowing. A+ good guying there, princess. If I really felt like it, I would totally make a whole other video talking about how much cooler it would have been if Honerva's mindscape had been the final battlefield. Darn it! If this was an anime, I might be convinced that everyone we know and love, including a bunch of Balmera showing up to help stop reality from collapsing, would seem inspirational, but it turns out to be all for naught, and that kind of kills the mood. Like, yeah, I can't wait for y'all to show up in the finale just so that you can not do anything. Like you're not even powering a spirit bomb, jeez.
You tried to help him.
No, Honerva. I bet Allura literally just brainwashed you in this scene, didn't she? Because no, they freaking did not! The Blue Lion shouldn't be in the middle of this final lineup. Stop it! Allura is a space goddess now. No, I mean it. This season was good. We didn't leave any loose ends. Here we get a shot of the original Voltron series, which I can fully appreciate. Lance and Allura date episode is good, and you can't convince me otherwise. All these flashbacks from Honerva satisfy my desire for Lotor flashbacks, to a point. Also, hey look, Lotor seems to have had the cat for some time. Now get a load of this. Aksha said that Narti, you know, the one of Lotor's generals that he killed, experienced the world through that cat. Based off of this flashback, I'm 100% certain that it is at least half canon that Lotor is the one who gave Narti the cat, and likewise her way to experience the world. How's that for putting the clues together? At least I managed to solve one tragic backstory. Hey look, we even covered the monster we mentioned back in Season 4, Part 1. This was an interesting story, by the way, but I have a hard time in my mind just acknowledging the fact that the ship blowing up would be enough to get rid of it. C'est la vie. The camera episode is highly entertaining, and though I might consider it semi-filler, I thought it was a fun way of doing things. Clear Day episode makes a callback to the Something Sparkly line from the Space Mall episode. Ha ha! We even brought back Bane! King Alfor totally just gave Lance his permission to date his daughter. Too bad that doesn't last long. Okay, this scene right here. Now let me tell you a bit about how much I love this scene. I've seen this so many times in other stories, but it's so interesting to see it because we're watching it from Honerva, the villain's point of view. I mean, how many times have I watched this scene play out from the perspective of a Zarkon or young Lotor character, where the kid says, "No, you're not my real mom," and then the illusion just breaks completely. Here we get to see it from the other side, and it's really cool because I'm not sure I've ever seen it done this way before. I have to give big props to how this all went down. It was awesome. Also, Baby Lotor! And, whoa, wait a second, this guy's Sendak! This is pretty fun. Lance getting Altean facial marks from Allura is the ultimate fan service that nobody wanted, but I still loved it. And finally, we have an epilogue! I've gotten so used to unsatisfactory endings in my anime or manga that just the fact that we wrapped everything up in a neat little package and with a little epilogue bow, it goes right on top of it, and with the words "Where are they now" written on the tag, it makes me very, very happy. And yes, I've been made aware that this is a Vehicle Voltron cameo. Very nice, very nice. Rectifying the situation with the Galra is also a nice touch, and now that we super magic their homeworld back into existence, they can all start over again. Voltron isn't needed anymore. The finality of this actually feels like closure, it's over, and it feels like a complete story. Oh boy, before I give my final thoughts, I may as well try to make everyone mad one more time, right? The mantra going into this final video was, I will not talk about the fandom. So yeah, when I reviewed Season 5, I intentionally left out the controversy that surrounded the season when it came out. You know, the one from the title card? It's not important, but I'll give my 2 cents on the elephant in the room. Shiro being gay doesn't matter one bit, and Adam is a worthless character foisted in to fit some sort of quota suddenly imposed into the story by the demand of the fans. That is what I believe. Happy now? No? That's not what you wanted to hear? Well, too bad. With how some things in the rest of the show were handled, I don't believe for a minute that the showrunners saying Shiro was not straight the entire time of the series was planned. No, I don't believe that for a minute. I don't care what you quote at me, it's a lie. As far as how they handled his sexuality, it was forced and pointless. In the end, it doesn't add anything to his character, which may be for the better considering making a big deal out of it and suddenly it being a focus for him after Season 4 would have been just as terrible as far as the effects of the fandom would have been concerned, but from the opposite side. Now, remember here, I still don't see this Shiro as any sort of reflection or continuation of the true Shiro that died in Season 4, and neither do the showrunners either, apparently. So, anything, literally anything they try to do with him that could add or detract from his character is completely a moot point to me. I would have had problems with this thing regardless of whether or not Adam was a thing, which he practically isn't. I honest to goodness think that the creators realized too late that they hadn't established well enough that a main character wasn't straight, so they didn't want to really change the story at this point either, and they had to think of something to do. So they wrote Shiro to have an ex-boyfriend back on Earth. Yes, ex-boyfriend. The only scene the two of them share together amounts to just being a breakup scene so that Shiro doesn't have to carry that weight. I legitimately just called Adam a roommate because if you looked at it through the right glasses, that's all you can see. Then he is nonchalantly killed off so that he doesn't have to be written any further into the story, and the show can just continue on as was planned. Of course people got mad. It was handled terribly. But I think that's okay, and do you know why? Anything short of an entire season doing nothing but making yaoi fanfiction fantasies come true was gonna piss people off, because the people who say they were looking for representation in the series were lying. Or at least a majority of them were. If Keith ended up with Lance, the Keith X Shiro shippers would have rioted anyway and vice versa. There are just a bunch of entitled fan brats who weren't looking to represent, they were looking for their ships to be canon, and quite frankly, even if what you call the PR surrounding Season 5 was queerbaiting, they deserved every bit of it for all the harassment and horror stories they've been at the center of for years. That's what I think. Screw them. Shiro was already ruined before all that crap went down anyway. He could have just been dead. We could have just made him some emotional backbone to the rest of the story and let him be remembered fondly, but no. He just had to stick around. What the hell sing ever, guys. Shiro is a mess now, but I can still say I loved him. You know what, guys? I get it, okay? I know why a lot of people didn't like the finale of Voltron, but in the end, I kind of did. If you've gotten to this point, especially after watching the other 2 parts in this video series, you've heard most of, if not all of the terrible criticisms I have for the show, and how deep I think some of the annoying bullcrap is. However, I can still honestly say that it's one of my favorite non-anime shows I've watched in a really long time. Starting it at the beginning of last year and then finishing it at the end was a nice experience. Like, something I'm glad I decided to do in spite of the fandom horror stories. I've just gone off on long tangents about what kinds of problems the series had, but I also listed off the good things that it did as well. As a whole, I definitely still recommend the series as something fun for anyone to sit down and watch. It's consistent in quality, in both visuals and audio. So what if the theme song never changed? The characters are varied and memorable. So what if a few were handled wrong? The story is a wild sci-fi adventure ride that draws out a range of emotions from the audience. So what if it doesn't always make sense? There was something I felt both times watching this show that was truly cathartic, finally reaching the end of a 76 or 78 episode run, and seeing the characters come to the end of their journey. The story had a beginning that was strong and set up for bigger events, a middle that dropped dramatically in terms of story quality, and then an end that managed to bring it back up and average out to something I enjoyed. This is sadly more than I can say for plenty of stories I've read and watched nowadays. It was a fun ride, and while it wasn't perfect, I wouldn't take back that time if I could because it made me happy to be a part of it. I won't always be happy when I'm talking about it in retrospect, but I'll be darned if all of the effort and planning or lack thereof goes unnoticed by me. I really like Voltron Legendary Defender, and as something that was inspired by a show from the 80s, I want to think that it is a story worth telling, and I'm glad it was allowed to run its course. There you have it, people of Earth and elsewhere. Spamcracker's very long talk about Voltron has finally come to a close. I have to thank you all for watching this once again and for coming all the way to the end of it. The sentiment means a lot. If you managed to come around and finish this final piece after making it through the dire straits of the first 2 videos, then congratulations. You are no longer a part of the Spam Elite Guard. You've been given the prestigious rank of Spam Star Commander. Your services will be remembered for generations to come. As always, if you got some enjoyment out of watching this video, press all those buttons down there. Like, subscribe, get notified, or follow me on Twitter to see what I'm up to. Also remember that just because I've finished these videos doesn't mean that I have to stop talking about Voltron. I want to know what you guys think. Agree with this video? Disagree with it? Half and half approximately, or some mix of those? Let me know and we can start some interesting conversations. I really am interested in knowing how other people see things. If you'd like to see the finished art up close and personal, I've got the link to that and other things in the description below. That'll be it for now, everyone. With one last sincere expression of gratitude, I send you on your way. Thank you for watching through the video up till the end, and I hope to see you in the next non-Voltron related one. Ciao!